Hello and welcome to the first of my rebooted lore series. I'm aiming at doing one of these videos every 1 to 2 weeks, and the topics will vary from races to individuals to events and really just anything that I find interesting, usually around 4 to 10 minutes. So today I'm going to be talking about the Tuskarr. I've always really liked these guys, so it seems like a natural start. Now, the species first appeared all the way back in Warcraft 3, when they were hostile creeps on the Ice-Crown Glacier map. Since then, they were in a whole bunch of the Warcraft RPG sourcebooks, and then also, of course, Wrath of the Lich King, where they were one of the very cool factions, in my opinion. Now, while the Warcraft RPG stuff generally is not considered to be canon, I think it will help fill the gaps and give us some extra cultural insight that we wouldn't normally get from the game. Let's get right into it. So they are a race of nomadic walrus-like humanoids that are mainly based off the Inuit peoples of Earth, but oddly enough they do actually have a few Easter Island-style heads floating around the place, with of course one of them being a quest giver in the Borean tundra. Now, while they are referred to as being nomadic, they do actually have 3 main settlements: unu'pe in Borean tundra, Kamagua in Howling Fjord, and moa'ki Harbour in Dragonblight. Apologies for any terrible pronunciation. Unfortunately for them, their main capital-ish place of Tuskarr was pretty much destroyed by the Kavaldir in the initial events of Wrath of the Lich King. Their origins are somewhat unknown, though Bronzebeard, our good little friend, does think that they actually descend from an ancient walrus guardian, which is pretty cool, and some also believe that they share a common ancestor with the Pandaren. Now, with all that basic stuff covered, I'm just going to talk about their culture, and then I'll move on to the history, their enemies, wars, and things like that. From what we see in-game, they basically just live in small communities that practice shamanism, live off the land, and in general, just try to keep on living. Some extra cultural information does come from the Warcraft RPG. Now again, while this stuff isn't always canon, I think it fits pretty well with how we see them in-game, and it sort of makes for some fun reading. Now, let's start with the most defining part of their culture, their family structures and their religion. Now, they are a very family-oriented society where basically it's family first, other family second, and individuals last. Basically, they all just work together to keep the family well-fed and safe, and then they look to larger problems after all that stuff is sorted. While they do prioritize the family stuff, it doesn't mean that they live apart. They do seem to live in communities of families that sort of stay together to help out with defense and fishing and just in general keeping each other safe. Now in-game we see that they do have overall community elders. I suppose this probably comes more from the shamanistic side, and it seems like they're more of a respected leader rather than a king. More just someone who's so wise that their word is generally taken to be pretty solid. Now, their religion, as I said, is shamanistic in nature. In Wrath, we see that they worship a few spirits. Islaruk is their eagle spirit of war, and Karkut is their spirit who watches over the dead. There's some fun speculation that he's actually the Lich King, but I don't think that makes a lot of sense because the Lich King doesn't really like them, and apparently they think that Karkut is kinda their buddy. There is also Tyutka, who supposedly guided the ancestors of the Tuskarr to Tuskarr. Then there's also Owachanoa, which is probably completely mangled on the pronunciation front, who is a sea creature thingy that they also regard as a spirit. We actually talked to that NPC in one of the quests. Apparently she might be a Loa, but the Loa are a topic for another day. The RPG also tells us that they have some simple rituals for things like births, deaths, marriages, sickness, and having a bountiful catch. And speaking of bountiful catches, they also do a lot of fishing, especially whaling. And a lot of that whaling is basically done atop these large boat-like sea turtles, which I think is just really cool. And it seems like they do a lot of their fishing both with regular fishing rods and then also nets and harpoons and things like that. And while I suppose we're talking a little bit about turtle-related things, there is the speculated link between them and the Pandaren. Many think that they share a common lineage before the sundering of Kalimdor into the continents that we know today, and one of the reasons why is because they're of a similar shape, they've got some shamanistic elements to their culture, and of course, most importantly of all, they ride turtles, but I don't think that's really much to go on. Now, while fishing is their main source of food, the RPG also tells us that they, especially the females, are involved with growing crops and harvesting berries, and finally they do a little bit of animal husbandry, which apparently includes keeping penguins, which I think is pretty awesome because penguins are damn cool. Now, I'll quickly mention their laws as specified by the RPG. Apparently every family member is expected to contribute towards the survival of the family, and the law is more meant to encourage that, rather than punish people in a hard or material manner. It's more that if you kind of don't help, your social standing will be hurt, though they are very serious about, blood vengeance if something is murdered. So don't go murdering people is the general gist of most law systems. Now, with all that culture stuff talked about, it's time to just briefly touch on their history. Or at least it would be time to do that if they actually bother to write any of it down. Yeah, there's not really much of a timeline with these guys. We know that they attribute the founding of Tuskarr to Noah, or however the hell you pronounce that thing, and since then they've basically just been surviving off the land and trying to not get killed. Trying to stay alive, though, in Northrend is pretty tricky, and they have had problems with the Kavaldir, the Scourge, the Ice Trolls, the Wulvar, and the Nyrubians, so lots of problems. They've spent their time basically trying to more defend their homes rather than crush their enemies. They're not warlike, they just want to protect their homes. The Ice Trolls and the Nyrubians are both very ancient powers, so it's reasonable to say that they are probably their most ancient enemy. The Scourge is more of a recent development. In terms of them fighting, well, we know that they fight in squads, and they use a lot of their whaling and fishing skills in combat, especially things like using harpoons and nets to trap and eventually kill their opponents. According to the RPG, they would sort of fight in close-knit cohorts of about 6 to 8, which I think makes sense with what we see in-game. Now, more recently, the events of Wrath of the Lich King definitely brought some hard times upon them, but it also brought some allies in the form of us. While no major lore advances happen, they do deal with a number of problems. Soon before the Alliance and Horde landed, a bunch of pirates arrived and they stole some ancient treasures from a very cool burial ground. Not a great move. The spirits didn't really like this, and it ended up awakening the Kavaldir, who then started to attack the shores of Northrend. Then, just after this, the Alliance and Horde sort of arrived. And while the Tuskarr are a neutral race, they apparently took a bit of a liking to the Horde's culture and helped them build Warsong Hold. This is a bit odd to me. I mean, just compare the in-game Tuskarr to the warlike structures and attitude of Garrosh's offensive. That just seems like a little bit of a blunder from Blizzard's perspective. Despite all this, they are basically friends to all, and they do welcome the help of Alliance players. So, in the Howling Fjord, that's where sort of the main stuff kicks off lore-wise. These stolen Vrykul artifacts eventually get found by players because the Tuskarr notice that they're gone, they notice the Kavaldir are coming, so they ask us for help. And we essentially just work to return them to their resting place. But when we do that, the Vrykul spirits are not pleased at all, and ultimately we fail at stopping the impending attack of the Kavaldir. And while the Kavaldir are mostly sort of focused on their most hated enemy, the Naga, they also don't particularly like the Tuskarr and destroy their main city of Kassala. Then in unu'pe, which is basically a place near Kassala, we fend off the attacking Kavaldir and then push them out of Kassala, and we also lay some of their spirits to rest. Also in the Borean Tundra, we help one of their spirits, who is in the form of one of those Easter Island-style faces, fight off Malygos's forces. As shown by this quest, and the quest in which we consult Anachanoa, or whatever, they do not, the spirits do not like Malygos's plan to control all magic. Apparently the overall sort of shamanistic religion of the Tuskarr believes that spirits sort of constitute magic, so Malygos controlling all magic would essentially doom their spirits and their ancestors, and that obviously is not something that they're pretty keen on. Then finally in moa'ki Harbour, we help them fight off the Wulvar, and we lay the spirits of Undule village to rest. The village was destroyed by a magical ley line, which was the result of the events of Malygos's war on magic and all that lovely tomfoolery. Other than that, the main events of their quests just involve helping them keep up with their daily business, things like fishing and stuff like that. Their story doesn't really progress past this point. All we know is that the Kavaldir are mostly fended off, the Scourge are under control, and Malygos is dead, so they should be relatively safe and just free to continue on as they always have. We do see two of them in Pandaria though, despite one of the pirates actually saying the Tuskarr slaves die within a few days. Away from their climate, we see that they cope just fine with the anglers in the Kasserang Wilds. Perhaps they died because, they were being kept as slaves, you pirate douche. Anyway, so that's essentially the lore of the Tuskarr. They're just one of my favourite races in the game. I just love the themes of them. I think their art is some of the best, and there's just something very relaxing about the quests and the music of their locations, so it's definitely something that I do like a lot. Anyway, that's it for this lore video. If you have any suggestions for topics, please leave them down in the description. Thank you very much for watching, subscribe for more, and I will see you next time.